Millions of Americans used to love Rick Harrison's name because of his wisdom, wit, and rags to riches a storyline on the hit TV show Pawn Stars. But on what seemed like an ordinary morning, that image was shattered when the FBI raided a mansion that was registered in his mother's name and found what the press called a real-life nightmare in a hidden room behind a false wall. They found more than just cash, guns, and financial documents, not only a list of victims, but also encrypted files and hard drives with information that made one FBI agent say, "We didn't just open a room, we opened hell." This wasn't just a celebrity scandal, it was a federal criminal case that turned Rick Harrison from a symbol of the American dream into the center of an investigation that had never been done before. It was so big and serious that it could make people lose faith in the whole reality TV industry. How could someone who was praised for being honest and trustworthy what exactly was in that room? Was Rick Harrison the victim of a plot or the leader of an underground empire? Let's find out in today's video. Davidson, North Carolina, the third child of a middle-class working family. His father, Richard Benjamin Harrison Sr., opened the gold and silver pawn shop in Las Vegas in 1989, which was a small business that had been running steadily. Rick became famous when the reality TV show Pawn Stars came out in 2009. The show quickly gained a huge following because of how Rick and his family ran the pawn shop like a small stage where every item had a hidden historical story. It wasn't just about business, it became a cultural phenomenon. Millions of viewers saw Rick as an honest, smart, down-to-earth man who had a unique ability to judge not only the value of things, but also the value of people. This image was strengthened by interviews, appearances at business conferences, media articles, and viral YouTube videos in which Rick came across as confident, principled, and sharp. That's why the public was so shocked when the FBI found a hidden room in his mother's mansion. Not only was there a crime, but a public image that had been built up over more than a decade was destroyed. What's interesting is that Rick Harrison hardly ever talked about his mother, Joanne Rue Harrison, who was married to Richard Sr. and was almost never seen by the public. She never went to premieres or business events and never appeared on the show. However, public records from the Nevada Tax Authority show that she owned several fixed assets, including the mansion that is now the focus of the FBI investigation. Financial experts have long wondered why Rick, who is known for being very careful with his money, would put a $5 million mansion in his mother's name. At the time, the most common explanations were family asset sharing or tax optimization. But after the recent discovery, those ideas are now looking less likely. Documents found in the hidden room include papers signed by a corporate entity with Joanne Harrison listed as its representative, as well as papers for several shell companies registered in Delaware, which has the laziest business laws in the U.S., was linked to her mansion's address. What's even more suspicious is that complicated international wire transfers were made in the names of family members, mostly Joanne. This brings up the important question of whether she was unknowingly being used to launder money, or was she an active member of the criminal network? Some criminologists say that Rick's use of his mother's mansion as a central hiding and coordination point was not legal. By using a relative's name as ownership, the property was less likely to be directly targeted by investigators. Its location in a private, gated community also made it less likely to attract attention. Former DA agent Tom Rankin said, "Using relatives to front corporations, hold property, and even facilitate transactions is a classic sign of organized money laundering." Investigators still don't know if Joanne Harrison was a victim of manipulation or an active co-conspirator, but the fact that she owns a mansion with a hidden room has put her under unavoidable scrutiny. People are now wondering why she kept quiet for so long and how many other family members knew or helped hide what Rick was doing. The next section will reveal the truth about Joanne, or more specifically about her house too. the FBI's secret raid and a shocking discovery at the beginning of the month, when most people in the neighborhood were still asleep. The FBI and a federal special task force quietly went to Rick Harrison's mother's house. There was no warning, no media coverage, and no leaks, according to sources from the U.S. Department of Justice. The search warrant was granted after authorities noticed problems in the gold and silver pawn shop that Rick owns. At first, they thought that Rick might be laundering money through high-value antique deals, but the financial problems were later found to be more serious. Data from the FinCEN network showed something bigger. Money was moving through a web of offshore companies based in Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and most notably through anonymous accounts in the Swiss banking system. What stood out most was that most of these transfers went to one place, Rick's mother's house in Las Vegas. The FBI suspected more wrongdoing and used the Patriot Act to track assets and follow the money. This phase lasted for almost 9 months until they had enough legal proof. What they found wasn't just problems, it was an underground facility hidden inside the house. Every wall and brick had been carefully placed to hide a huge secret. A hidden room that wasn't on the original plans, wasn't covered by building permits, and was hidden behind a wall that wasn't there. This is a common trick used by organized crime groups in architecture. The room was hidden behind a small living room that wasn't used very often and could only be reached by an electromechanical system with no keys. When agents broke into the space, they saw right away that it wasn't just a storage area. It had its own lighting system, flame-resistant steel shelves, and military-grade secure filing cabinets. What made them stop was the active wall-mounted mini-servers. At that moment, the story about Rick Harrison, the man millions of people trusted, went from being suspicious to being incredibly certain. On the shelves, they found hundreds of documents. There were paper records of ownership transfers, transaction statements, and ownership transfer contracts for more than 17 companies in Latin America, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. Many of the wire transfer contracts were for millions of dollars and were signed under fake names or legal entities with no identifiable representatives. Most of the transactions could not be tracked because they were done in highly encrypted digital currencies, which is a method that is becoming more common in international money laundering operations. The FBI said it was undeniable evidence of organized money laundering. Next to the files were big stacks of cash sealed in moisture-proof bags. There was almost $5 million in cash, euros, British pounds, and a surprising amount of Bitcoin printed as cold wallets. An offline way to store cryptocurrency meant to avoid being found. This wasn't the cash stash of a wealthy person. It was a systematized and secured war chest typical of criminal enterprises. What was even scarier was the arsenal that was found. 11 handguns, 3 assault rifles, 2 Militaria sniper rifles. There were over 0 rounds of ammunition and rifles, but none of them were registered. The serial numbers on some of the weapons were either missing or defaced, making them impossible to track down. It was clear that some of these weapons came from Eastern Europe's black market, which has a history of being linked to mafia and illegal arms networks. Authorities immediately wondered if this was just a stash or an active transit hub for a larger underground operation run by Rick Harrison. Then they found what no one expected: records of people being trafficked. Hidden in a wall-mounted safe were dozens of personal files with names, photos, ID numbers, and sometimes last known locations of people who were reported missing in the national database. What's even scarier is that many of the victims were children from Latin America, Southeast Asia, and even the United States. Some files had notes on the victims' physical conditions and temporary holding locations, which showed a disturbing level of planning and suggested this wasn't just trafficking. All the information was encrypted using internal codes and jargon, but the servers in the room had the full decoding algorithms. The FBI came to the conclusion that this was a central data coordination hub used to store, manage, and analyze financial flows, transactions, and operations for a criminal organization. In other words, it wasn't a place to hide. It was a control center where Rick Harrison, or someone authorized by him, planned everything from laundering money to managing illegal assets, to trafficking victims to managing human resources. When the first report came out, shock and outrage spread across the U.S. People asked how someone like Rick Harrison, a respected public figure with no history of legal trouble, could be part of a network this cruel and sophisticated. His familiar image on TV in a polo shirt with sharp eyes and witty charm now seemed like a mask that had just been ripped off to reveal a shocking criminal operation. The FBI was most worried about what they saw when they recovered data from the servers. On those servers, they found not only records of internal transactions, but also encrypted emails sent and received with addresses linked to people on Interpol's Red Notice list. This showed that Rick Harrison or his network wasn't working alone, but was part of a transnational crime chain. Experts now think this could be one of the biggest white-collar crime cases of all time. The criminal organization was big and involved in money laundering, human trafficking, and illegal arms dealing. One anonymous FBI agent put it bluntly, "We didn't just find a hidden room, we unlocked a maze." 3. The documents and the international criminal network were started a full-scale investigation soon after the FBI first told the public about what they found in the hidden room in Rick Harrison's mother's house. The seized electronic devices showed not only questionable transactions, but also a well-organized years-long transnational criminal enterprise centered on human trafficking, money laundering, and making huge illegal profits legal. The most upsetting evidence was a list of trafficking victims, many of whom were between the ages of 14 and 25 and came from Mexico, Honduras, Cambodia, Vietnam, and even the U.S., where some had been missing for 3 to 7 years. These weren't just any names on a list. They were the victims' real names. They were kept in well-organized files with ID codes, information about their health, temporary housing, and other details that eerily resembled a human resource management system. For victims, some entries were color-coded with notes on profitability, flight risk, or high client potential, which human rights experts say is undeniable proof of organized human trafficking. What made the network even harder to find was that it operated behind fake names. For example, Rick Harrison's pawn shop had allegedly become famous across America by design or ignore a hub where money, goods, and even people moved under the guise of legal business. Victims were brought into the U.S. through illegal border crossings, visa waivers, or fake labor contracts. Once inside, many were taken advantage of under the guise of working at the pawn shop or in warehouses, where they were forced to work and were abused or sent somewhere else. Internal reports found on the hidden server showed at least 37 personnel transactions in the 18 months before the raid. That number, likely the Department of Homeland Security, stepped in right away to find out where the money came from and how it was laundered. This is where the second part of the puzzle came together. Large transactions were disguised as legal purchases of antiques, precious metals, high-value watches, and rare collectibles. Rick Harrison's reputation as a skilled appraiser let him give almost any item a plausible story. So a $2,000 bronze statue could be certified as real and sold for $50,000 as an example. This price difference created the perfect opportunity to legalize dirty money. All of these deals happened through shell companies with what looked like real accounting records. The buyers, who were usually other network members, paid in cash or cryptocurrency. The funds would then flow through multiple middlemen and come out on the other side as clean money. Financial experts compared the system to the layering phase of money laundering, where multiple transaction layers make it nearly impossible to trace funds unless some of the items used in these schemes were real antiquities that were smuggled from war zones. The FBI confirmed that at least 9 of the artifacts shown on Pawn Stars came from Syria, Iraq, or Afghanistan, and are considered stolen cultural property under international law. This expanded the case from financial crime to breaking heritage laws and possibly helping armed groups in conflict zones. Rick's pawn shop wasn't just a business back then, it was a community center. It was the perfect cover. With tens of thousands of customers a year, non-stop transactions, and national fame, the store became a great front. No one questioned a famous TV personality like Rick Harrison, and buyers weren't too interested in where things came from when they were interested in his captivating stories. Also, federal rules let many high-value items change hands without any paperwork, making the environment perfect for hiding illegal activities. The amount of money that was laundered, an estimated $72 million over 5 years, wasn't what worried the police most. It was how complicated the organization was. This wasn't the work of amateurs or a small ring. It had financial units, logistics coordinators, personnel managers, tech security, and a media front. Rick's fame didn't stop him from committing crimes. It made them easier to do business with him, and it kept him out of trouble for years. FBI Special Investigator Emily Ruiz says this isn't just a criminal case. It's a new type of criminal enterprise where the line between legal and illegal is so blurred that even a trained auditor might not find it. She also says Rick Harrison isn't just a famous person who got caught up in a mess. Based on what we've seen, he built this whole network using the power of his own brand. The FBI is now keeping an eye on some of Rick's former business partners, some of whom were on the show or at public events with him, on suspicion of helping or acting as middlemen in the drug trafficking and laundering chains. What started as a personal finance investigation has now turned into a federal investigation into international organized crime, and more than 30 people could face charges in the next phase. If someone with everything, wealth, fame, and respect, like Rick Harrison, chose to join the criminal underworld, why did they do it? That's what the next section will look into as psychologists, lawyers, and investigators share their thoughts on criminal psychology, the role of the media, and the nature of power in the modern world. 4. The fallout and the shock to the American public. As soon as news of the FBI raid on Rick Harrison's mother's mansion hit the news, major news outlets all over the country went crazy. News outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, NBC, and Fox News all ran front-page stories about what was quickly being called one of the biggest celebrity scandals of the decade. Rick Harrison's name was suddenly everywhere, not as a successful businessman or a beloved TV personality, but as the main suspect in a complex criminal network linked to human trafficking and international money laundering. The public was shocked because Rick had long been seen as a symbol of the American dream. While he wasn't in college, the regular guy from a working-class background used his smarts, hustle, and streetwise charm to build a reality TV empire. Pawn Stars wasn't just a show, it became a cultural icon. Viewers learned history through old objects, saw the art of negotiation in real time, and believed that even a dusty item from a garage sale could have a story worth telling. So when the man behind the brand was revealed as the possible leader of a criminal empire, the public didn't just feel people were shocked and upset when they found out what happened. Many compared it to being stabbed in the back by an old friend. Rick wasn't just a celebrity. He was seen as likable and relatable, like the neighbor next door. Online forums and social media sites, especially Reddit and Twitter, were filled with shock and disbelief. I grew up watching his show, What Now? All these years I trusted him. And this is the truth, and chillingly, is there anyone left we can believe in? When the story came out, 72% of people polled said they no longer trusted reality TV stars, and 61% thought shows like Pawn Stars should be permanently canceled if their stars were involved in serious crimes. The backlash wasn't just directed at Rick. It affected the whole reality TV industry, which has been criticized for creating false expectations. The media response was just as quick. Within 48 hours, History Channel pulled all new episodes and reruns of Pawn Stars from their schedule. This included DVD distributors, streaming services, and brand partners. Walmart and Amazon said they would stop selling Rick Harrison-related items until the investigation was over. This kind of market reaction is common in celebrity scandals, but in Rick's case, the speed and size of the reaction showed how serious the allegations were. Rick's family also got a lot of negative attention. His late father, Richard Boldman Harrison, had been a calm, serious character on the show for a long time, often playing the voice of reason to Rick's jokes. And now even his legacy was being dragged into the scandal as people looked through the family's history for clues they might have missed. Rick's son, Corey Harrison, who was once seen as the heir to the pawn empire, is now being looked at by investigators because his name is on some of the financial documents that were found in the hidden room. This is especially painful because the Harrisons had been carefully portrayed by the media as the model American family, but that story has now been shattered. What started out as an inspiring story of family and determination is now being looked at by the federal government. At a recent press briefing, an FBI spokesperson confirmed, "We are not ruling out the possibility that family members may have knowingly or unknowingly helped with illegal activities. Legal ownership, shared accounts, and asset transfers are all being looked at." The case has also started a larger national conversation about whether or not Americans are too quick to idolize TV stars, and whether or not fame and success have blinded us to warning signs. Media experts say that Rick Harrison's carefully crafted everyman persona allowed him to maintain a perfect public facade, one so convincing that nobody ever thought to look behind the curtain. One of the saddest effects of the scandal is how it has affected real victims of human trafficking and financial crimes. The fact that such a famous person could be directly white-collar criminals still get social and legal breaks, which has led to more criticism. Human rights groups like Polaris International Justice Mission and Save the Children have called on the government to prosecute to the fullest extent and use this case as a turning point for tighter oversight on businesses with unclear financial operations for the American public. The Rick Harrison scandal isn't just about one man's downfall. It's a harsh reminder of how fragile trust can be, and how when trust is used to hide horrible crimes, it's very bad. What the FBI found in that Las Vegas mansion wasn't just cash, weapons, or ledgers. It was the collapse of a shared illusion that a well-known TV personality who millions of people thought they knew couldn't be hiding something so bad. 5 expert analyses revealed the power behind the persona because of the size and complexity of the case. Investigators quickly turned to the man's mental health, behavior, and motivations. Rick Harrison didn't seem like the typical criminal. He hadn't been convicted of a crime before, wasn't in a gang, and wasn't on any police watch lists. But behind a hidden wall in his mother's mansion was a carefully planned underground system. Criminal enterprise structured with the precision of a multinational corporation. This made criminology, financial crime, and mass media experts wonder, what made someone like Rick Harrison disappear into the shadows? Forensic psychologist at the Federal Justice Institute says that Rick is a classic example of what she calls a celebrity white-collar criminal. She explains people like Rick don't use violence or threats. Instead, they manipulate through trust, reputation, and social power. They live in the illusion that they can't be harmed because they think the public values them, Maxwell says that this makes them even more dangerous than regular criminals because their whole persona is a shield that the people they're deceiving often praise. Control, she says, was Rick's main goal. He didn't just want to make money. He wanted to control the people, the money, and even how the world saw him. Fame wasn't just a reward, it was a tool. Using his fame as a shield, Rick built an almost impossible-to-track criminal operation that ran unchecked for years. Rick was too famous, too charming, and too well-liked by the media to be investigated further. So what was his real goal? Was it money, fame, or something more? Stephen Gallagher, a senior investigative attorney who specializes in Latin American money laundering, thinks Rick didn't need money. His income from the show, his merchandise, and his side businesses were more than enough. What he wanted, Gallagher says, was a private power structure, a world where he was the in public. He had to follow the rules set by cameras and the media, but behind closed doors, he was the only person who could make decisions. Gallagher comes to the conclusion that from a financial point of view, Rick's methods were similar to those used by drug cartels, shell companies, high-value items that can be moved, like antiques and watches, digital currencies that can't be tracked, and multiple transactional layers that cut the link between origin and destination. This is what made Rick's network so because he knew so much about both financial loopholes and consumer psychology. He was able to turn ordinary objects into money, washing tools, and was praised for it. One of the most interesting insights came from Michael Kern, a media studies professor at Columbia University. Instead of focusing only on Rick Carna, Kern looked at society as a whole. Rick Harrison didn't create his myth, we did. People liked the show, bought the merchandise, shared the clips, and thought he was smart, kind, and relatable. People didn't question his fame, which gave him immunity. Reality TV, on the other hand, is especially dangerous because it lets a stranger into your home every night through the screen. When Rick talked to a customer on Pawn Stars, he was also talking to millions of viewers who thought they knew him and trusted him like family. That's where power comes from, and Rick was able to hide behind a mask for years. This case also raises questions for the legal system. There should be stricter oversight of public figures with commercial influence, especially in cash-heavy collectibles-based industries. Some U.S. lawmakers are already calling for more financial audits of reality TV businesses. As criminal lawyer Kristen Bell puts it, fame used to be a legal shield after Rick. It needs to become a liability factor. Behavioral analysts see a larger trend at work, which they call progressive moral disconnect. As people get more successful, they start to separate their actions from their original value. One analyst explained that they no longer think they're doing anything wrong because they're surrounded by people who agree with them and who want to see results. This kind of ethical drift becomes normalized, and the price of fame isn't just a ruined reputation. It's also broken public trust, which has effects on families, communities, and the very industry Rick helped build. What the FBI found in that hidden room wasn't just proof of one man's fault. It was a warning about unchecked power based on his TV reputation. When the door to the hidden room in Rick Harrison's mother's mansion opened, it wasn't just bricks, money, or files that were revealed. It was an entire underground world built on layers of success, fame, and public trust that was revealed in all its disturbing reality. Rick Harrison, who used to be a familiar face in millions of American homes, is now seen as a symbol of collapse, not just a fall from fame into darkness, but also from total admiration to collective outrage. The fame that Rick spent over a fame is a double-edged sword. It can make an ordinary man into a legend, but it can also turn one mistake into a national reckoning. In this case, it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern of deliberate behavior hidden behind the things that made him loved. His popularity, sincerity, and the image of a perfect American family. This scandal doesn't just end Rick Harrison's career. It forces society to face a hard truth. Have we become too tolerant of media-made celebrities? How many more hidden rooms are out there that were built with fame, power, and blind public admiration? Would they ever be found, or would they keep running silently like cancer cells in a body that looks healthy? Rick is paying a price that's not just legal. His family is now involved in the investigation. His brand is destroyed, and the show that was once praised as the pride of American reality TV is now a case study in how easy it is to trick viewers, producers, partners, and viewers have all been hurt by a system that let unchecked fame turn into something dangerous. That room buried deep inside a quiet Las Vegas mansion is now a grim reminder of a costly lesson. It shows that no reputation is immune to ethics, that the lights of TV can shine on someway, but also cast deep shadows if they know how to play the part, and most importantly, it's a warning injustice must be stricter and never look away in a world where fame is easier to get than real trust. Rick Harrison may never be on TV again, but his story and that hidden room will be told in law, schools, media boardrooms, and dinner tables for years to come as one of the best examples of what happens when collective illusion replaces accountability. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to see what happens next in the case that shook a whole nation.